Hey everyone, welcome back to another crypto video. Today we're going to talk about futures and Bitcoin futures, and she is our sponsor today. If you hear humming in the background, that's my computer speakers. I don't know why that's happening. Hear that? Weird. Must be some kind of bridge connection or something. Anyways, so the big news, you could call it big news, is that the Chicago Board Options Exchange, which is the largest options exchange in the world, or one of them, is going to be releasing Ethereum Futures in December. So they were also the ones who last year released Bitcoin Futures onto their exchange. So futures are a little bit complicated. I'll admit that I don't really fully understand how they work, but before we get into Ethereum futures and what I think is going to happen and how I think things are going to play out, I'm going to talk about a little bit about what futures are. So practically, they are when a buyer and a seller agree on a price of a specific commodity. So imagine oil, for example. So an oil producer really wants to sell their oil. Obviously, that's why they make it. They want to be able to sell their product, and they will offer futures contracts, that says, hey, here's a specific amount of oil for this price, and the contract ends in 8 months. And at the end of the 8 months, you will pay whatever agreed upon price, and you will receive the oil. So from a producer's standpoint, it allows them to make sure that they're continuing to sell their product while they continue to produce. It just allows for good cash flow. So on the consumer side, maybe an industrial plant or some industrial consumer that uses a lot of fuel, it helps them with budgeting and financials. If they know that, hey, the price of oil, they can buy at this price and they can buy it in 6 months, and they can make sure that they're constantly getting a source of fuel. It just makes things easier on their end. So that kind of a relationship is really healthy, and it happens all the time where industrial customers or whatever customers and producers will agree on the price of commodities. So there's this other group of people, the investors, the people like you and I who have no use for 10,000 gallons or 10,000 barrels of oil. What am I going to do? I might sit in my backyard and hope it doesn't catch on fire while it appreciates or depreciates in value, and then it's just not practical. But they still invest in it, and they invest in things where obviously they think the price is going to go up, so they buy the futures contract now, and then when the price does go up, if it does go up, they sell near the end of their futures contract period. So usually futures contracts will last like 6 to 12 months. So if they got money, the price went up and they made some money, they'll sell their futures contracts and they'll get the money. It's a little bit more complicated than that, I know. It's super confusing, and it's kind of not really like stocks, and it's more difficult. But for the gist of it, that's how they work. And so if you kind of apply that to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, it's a little bit strange, right? Because, most of the people, if they have interest in Bitcoin enough to put any kind of money in it, they're just going to hold the Bitcoin. They're going to go onto an exchange like Coinbase and just go buy the Bitcoin and, have $100 worth of it and just have it sit there, and maybe it goes up in value. Not many people really looking into futures contract just because of who the audience of cryptocurrency is. Not really smart investors, to be honest, as we saw last year. However, it also makes you think, why would you want to buy a futures contract instead of just buying Bitcoin? And that's a little bit tricky. However, there's some really easy arguments to make. For example, last year, everybody knows that Bitcoin hit its magnificent price of $20,000. At the time of $20,000, what caused that is the supply and demand, obviously. A lot of people wanted to get into Bitcoin, so that meant a lot of people were buying in. There was a lot of network activity going on. And when that activity was going on, what did it do? Congested the network. When the network was congested, the transaction fees went up. So around that time, I believe the average price for a transaction was something like $50. And there was a backlog of like 10 to 12 hours, which is absolutely insane, especially for something that's trying to be an alternative currency for everyday use. Maybe not for everyday use, but you get the idea. So what that meant was, if you wanted to send your friend Billy $1 worth of Bitcoin, you'd have to pay $51. You'd pay $50 worth of transaction fees, and Billy would get his $1 worth of Bitcoin 12 hours after you initiated the trade. So obviously, if you're a Bitcoin trader, day trader, that doesn't work. So with futures contracts, you don't have to deal with any of those things. The Chicago Board Options Exchange is literally built for that kind of volume. It's built for, day trading and short-term trading, and the fees, a lot of times you can get away with pretty minimal fees. I know a lot of new accounts, you can get 25 trades for free, so there's no trading fees, and the transaction times are nearly instant. So that's something that's also interesting, is the benefit of having a futures contract and trading futures contract is a concept called slipping. So slipping is when you initiate a trade or you initiate a sell at an expected price, and on an exchange like a Bitcoin exchange, the executed trade price might not always equal however much you want it, and that's called slippage. And the more volatility in the market, the higher the slippage. So with futures contracts, that doesn't exist because that stuff's instant, and you're not actually dealing with the commodity itself. So there's actually a lot of pros, especially if you want to try to be a day trader of Bitcoin. Futures contracts is the way to go, especially if you think about when the highest swings in price are, it's when the more people are trying to buy in or more people are trying to sell out. So you have more network activity, and then you go back to having these transaction fees are crazy, and these, the backlog of transactions are crazy. So next, going into Ethereum. So Ethereum's a little bit different. So Ethereum has these projects called ERC20 coins. That's what they call them, these altcoins. And essentially, they run on the Ethereum network. So they can be transferred directly from Ethereum into whatever altcoin they use, requests, who knows, whatever. And so what a lot of people do is a lot of people speculate on these altcoins, and that's because the price for them is relatively low in compared to Bitcoin or Ethereum. When Bitcoin or Ethereum is at a $200 million market cap, it's not likely going to multiply by 10 times value. But when an altcoin is $2 million, the chances of it just going to 20 million for no reason, especially in the crypto world, is likely. So a lot of people, I say likely, but last year it was likely. So a lot of people will buy Ethereum just to transfer that or exchange that into an altcoin. I do that a lot myself. There's a lot of altcoins that I like, so I buy Ethereum, swap over to whatever coin I want on an exchange like Binance, and there we go. Of course you can do that with Bitcoin, but as we just talked about with Bitcoin fees, transaction speeds, Ethereum's faster, and it has lower fees just because of the usage. So with that point, it makes it interesting that Ethereum futures, I think, would even see less than expected amount of use just because of that reason alone. People are going to want to use their Ethereum to buy into altcoins that they think are going to moonshot or something. But nevertheless, having Ethereum futures is always a good way to legitimize, the crypto world a little bit more, by having a way to invest in that particular coin without actually having to own any of it. So the last thing I wanted to talk about here was how Bitcoin futures did last year, because I remember I heard about it, I read a lot about it, a lot of people were excited, and then it came out and you didn't really hear much about it. So I was reading an article, and they had referenced the San Francisco Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve did a study on the price of Bitcoin when futures came out, and they claimed that the futures had a direct correlation with the Bitcoin price dropping. So their argument is that futures was a way for people who were pessimistic about the market to speculate on price. So you can buy a futures contract and say, hey, I think Bitcoin's going to go down to 5,000, you know, and then you buy a futures contract for 5,000. You know, to think the price is going to drop. So I don't think that necessarily will happen with Ethereum, just because the market kind of, as it is right now, the volatility is always still there, but it's not nearly as extreme as it was last year. I think we've kind of settled out now. Now's the accumulation period for those who really believe in these projects will just quietly acquire tokens when the price is low. So I don't think when Ethereum Futures comes out, I don't think we're going to see anything drastic happen. You know, I think it's still a good way if you really want to try to be a trader. That's probably one of the best ways to do it. Certainly for Bitcoin futures, if you want to do that. But yeah, it's always interesting to see more legitimacy come around to crypto. But I don't really think this will have too much of an effect overall. But anyways, I guess we'll see what happens come next year. Maybe I'll be eating my words. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching, and let me know how you think Ethereum futures are going to do in the upcoming year.